Hey guys, welcome back to RMA Garage. I'm Mark and I'm glad you joined us today. In this video, we are going to be continuing working on my son's 2015 YZ250FX. Now, in this video, we're going to be doing the throttle assembly. We're going to be taking apart the inside where the cables connect to the throttle. We're going to be taking the rubber boot off of the brake and kind of inspecting that and seeing if that lever needs lubricated. Of course, before we do that, we got to take the handguard off. Basic, really simple stuff this evening. It's almost 7 o'clock and I didn't want to get into something really big, but you know, sometimes you want to work on the bike, but you don't want to get really involved in it. So we're just going to do something quick and easy this evening and hopefully educate you guys. All right, so let's get to it. Okay guys, so we are going to start with taking the handguard off. This is a number 6 socket head Allen wrench. And sometimes these are a pain to get off because these are our first line of defense when we fall off the bike and the bike falls over. So these tend to get very dented, deformed, and sometimes it takes a good bit of doing to get these things off. All right, so then this is a number 12 on the front here. Okay, we'll just stick that back in there for safekeeping. All right, now sometimes pound that back in. Hopefully this will come out. Sometimes you gotta unscrew this a little bit more and I'll show you why. Because there's a jam nut in there. You gotta unscrew it to a point so that the jam nut can slip past. Real world experience here, folks. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, there's a jam nut right here, and this one actually isn't too deformed, but it definitely can be hard. If you've landed on the side here and this whole thing deforms in, sometimes it's tough to get out. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is take these little plastic cable ties off because we're gonna need to loosen up the wire. Okay, because we're gonna have to take this off and get it out of the way so we can access this. Now before we do that, we're going to loosen these up and slide this out of the way just to make it a little bit easier because the lever can sometimes get in the way of the bolt that's back here. Okay, but these two bolts, this is a number 8. I do not use the large ratchet. You do not want to use a ratchet with a number 8 on the end because leverage here is important. You don't need a lot of leverage. The torque specs on these bolts are very small and you don't want to over tighten these because I have snapped these into the lever housing here, the actual assembly, and it's not a good day to do that. It takes a while to get it back out. So always use the tiniest wrench when torquing and loosening these bolts because you don't want to overdo it. Okay, so we'll slide that just a little bit out of the way. And at risk of moving the camera yet again, there's a tiny little Phillips head screw, and I'll show you once I get it off. Very, very tiny, that's holding this starter button on. Okay, so then this comes off. I'll show you here in a second. All right, so this is kind of how it works. You got this starter button here, and then this hooks on the one end, and this hooks on the other end like so. And then it clamps onto the bar. So you see there's a tiny little Phillips head. Very, very small, and then this side of the sheet metal is actually threaded, so that actually threads in. So you have to take these off because they will not stay. So okay, so we got the switch off. It's a little dirty inside, so we'll probably end up cleaning that before we put it back on. With the throttle assembly here, it is completely covered up with this rubber boot. So in order to get this apart, this boot is covering the two screws. They should be right in here somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this back just a little bit. Okay, so you take that comes off of there. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this rubber boot and you're going to slide this over just a little bit, not too much. Okay, so those bolts are on. There's actually two Phillips head screws in the back here, and I'll show you. And again, this is not very tight. You're dealing with very, very small torque specs. So as you can see, there's the screws. So as you can see, there's two lines going into here, two cables. It's a push-pull. So there's two wires, two cables that go into this. So when you take this off, you want to make sure that you pay attention to how this thing goes together. I will show you. These are the two halves. These are made out of aluminum. Okay, so those are going to need to be cleaned up. There's some dirt around the edges here. We'll eventually clean those up. Okay, now what you have is the cables wrap around the throttle assembly. And there's going to be two places. See, one goes in right here, and then the other one gets on this side. Okay, so you can see both cables wrap around. So now these are not going to get mixed up. We're not going to take this apart any further than it is now. But you can see this is all dirty. We're going to clean all of this up. We're also going to clean the bar. I usually take some 600 grit sandpaper, which we're going to do to kind of smooth this out. Sometimes you get burrs on this. And then we'll clean the inside of the throttle tube. All right, so the other part we're going to take off is this boot. Now this boot, if you take notice, this little indentation basically goes where the bolt is that is the pivot point for the lever. Okay, so no worries there. What we're going to do is we're going to take this apart. Actually, that's not the pivot. It's a little stubborn, but it will come off. All right, so what I have here is just a wet rag, some nice hot water, and some Simple Green. Basically, I'm just kind of cleaning as much up as I possibly can. Getting all the dirt off. We can also take this boot off. Might as well put that on the workbench. It's a little trick getting it off because those wires have to go through there. Or maybe we can. Can we get these off? There we go. So we'll just have to feed that back through. As you can see, there's not too much burr, but right here where it's clamped, there's a little bit. But we'll smooth this off a little bit. You can see where the paint's rubbed off right there. So that's from operating the throttle. So we'll just kind of smooth it up here in a little bit. Again, this isn't that dirty, so I'm kind of cheating on this one. I was actually kind of excited about doing this because there really isn't a whole lot of work to do. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this clamp off completely because I can see dirt behind it. Just let that hang. I can get a little picky with this. One, I know that this is all that I'm doing this evening, and two, it's really not that bad. So that's pretty clean. So we'll set that aside. And there's the brake lever. Again, we're just getting the heavy stuff, which there really isn't much at all. This is for the most part clean. There's a little bit of dirt on it, but nothing too bad. And I'm gonna put skips on this. If you guys don't wanna watch me clean this, that's fine. Other people do. So I will put chapters in this video so you guys can skip ahead. I love that, by the way. I love when videos have skips, so you can go right to the part that interests you the most. You don't have to wait and see and guess. So from now on, I'm putting chapters in all my videos. I think it's a great idea. And I've been noticing too, YouTube's been putting chapters, they've been doing their own chapters, which I don't know how they do that. If it's if it's a computer program or people going on there, I'm not sure how all that works. Okay, so now we can get the whole bar nice and clean. And then the switch here, again, we're just gonna take as much dirt out of this as we can. My wife always reminds me, it's a dirt bike, it's gonna get dirty again. Yeah, I know, but there's just something about unloading a bike off a truck that's so clean. People think it's new until they look at the fenders and see how scratched up they are because they were riding. Okay, so it's looking good. Now, if I wasn't making this video, I'd probably have a radio going with some music or maybe a podcast, maybe a sermon, something to preoccupy my time while I enjoy working on my machines. Okay, so then after that, I'll get a rag, dry rag, and then dry all this off. Okay, I'm gonna wet that a little bit. Wet the sandpaper. I'm just gonna sand this smooth. And again, it wasn't really that bad. And I'm not gonna go hog wild because I don't wanna take all the paint off. But basically, I'm just sanding down any places where there may have been a burr or a bump or something. Okay, so that's good. Wipe this down. And we'll dry that off. And that is really nice and smooth now. Now there is a little bit of a crease right here, and that's where the clamp for the throttle goes. So that we don't have to worry about. But everything else outside of that is good. All right, moving over to the workbench, I'm gonna take this piece of rubber and I'm gonna just put it in a bucket of water. And that simple green, this is the boot for the front brake. We're gonna just basically let that soak in there for a little bit. And these are the aluminum casings. Now there really isn't a lot of grease in these, so it's not gonna be too bad. I'm just gonna wet them down a little bit, and then what we're gonna do is just clean the dirt. So dirt gets in between. So the way this is how the throttle goes together. and there's a lot of dirt that gets in between the grip and the cable housing. So what we want to do is you want to get a little wet, clean it up, get as much dirt off. And I use Simple Green because it is somewhat of a grease cutter. You don't have to use anything that's really harsh. You don't need brake cleaner or anything like that, because we're basically going to put grease back in and around it just a little bit. But as you notice here, there's no grease really in the housing itself. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but there's really no grease inside of here. The grease is more or less the cable and the actual throttle itself. All right, so that's clean. Dip this one in. All right, that one's for the most part clean, and we'll dry these off. Okay, so now this throttle, this has got a little bit more grease on it, and we're going to wait and do this one at the end, because once we get done with this, the rag is going to be pretty much all greased up, dirty and nasty. So the best way that I've found to clean these is letting them soak, and then, quite honestly, I'm going to show you a little trick that I use. I know this sounds kind of weird, but this is a little brass brush, and what happens is that the dirt kind of gets stuck to the rubber and it doesn't want to come off. So what I do is I use this, and it just agitates the dirt just enough. I'm not really scrubbing. I'm just more or less just kind of rubbing it over a little bit. And it's not really even scratching the rubber, but what it's doing is it's kind of loosening it up a little bit and getting all of that nastiness out of there. Now I've just turned this inside out just to kind of, again, rub it. And I've got I wouldn't say a lot of Simple Green, but enough that I can smell it pretty good. And that helps break up everything as well. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Simple Green can soften rubber a little bit. So this kind of makes it a little bit easier to clean when it softens it. Okay, so that's good. Now what we'll do is we'll dry it off. And then I use a rag when I dry it, because this is kind of like the finish cleaning part of it. I'm kind of rubbing it and rubbing off all of the dirt. I do not do this after every ride. Just so you guys know, this is year-end stuff here. So now that's kind of nice. That's nice and clean there. So that's good. So we'll put that aside. And this one's a bit more dirty. So this one's going to require a little bit more. So again, skip ahead if you don't want to watch me do this. Okay, now we're gonna see if we can flip this thing inside out and do the inside a good bit, because it was pretty bad in there. Yeah, there's a good bit of dirt in there as well. Yep, that's clean. Just a little bit, it wasn't too bad. All right, that looks good. And again, we're gonna dry this off and we're gonna rub it down. Any places where I think there might still be dirt. We can get on the inside. And there you have it. So that's nice and clean. All right, so the last little bit here, I mean, the grip is obviously, it's glued on, and we're not changing them out. This actually still has a little bit of life left in it. My son didn't want new grips at the moment. So there's a little bit of dirt, so wet this down a little bit. And then I just start more or less cleaning off all the plastic parts, getting as much of the dirt out from between the grip and where the cables connect. And again, there's no really special instruction. You just have to be really wanting to do it. As you can see, I'm using an old sock. My rags tend to get, they're very eclectic. I have shirts and t-shirts and shorts and sweatpants and everything that my kids and my wife don't want to wear anymore. And then sometimes I go for a rag and there's one of my shirts that I thought I was going to keep forever and it's in the rag bin. Yep, much to my surprise. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to see if I can get this sock through the center of this. I might be able to. Take a pencil, push it through maybe. It's getting there. Is it going to get stuck? Can't get it all the way through. But that is definitely cleaning it out. All right, so that's pretty much dirty now. So what we'll do is we'll turn this inside out. And we'll go from the other side and clean that other side. Okay. Okay, so that throttle tube is pretty clean. There's a little bit of dirt still around the edge here. Now, if this was at the end of a long day, I wouldn't be getting this particular. A long day of cleaning, that is. I was at work all day. But I don't mind spending a little bit of extra moment because I really have only been working on this for about an hour. So when you spread these things out over a period of time, you tend to get a little bit more picky and you get a little bit cleaner. But if I'm trying to get things done in one day or one evening or afternoon, then things tend to get a light washing instead of a deep clean. All right, one throttle grip that is completely clean. Mostly. But as you can see, there's definitely it's nice and clean there. And we're going to be adding more grease to that. So, all right, guys, we are ready to reassemble. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is start with the brake. And we're going to put this back on. Okay, we'll kind of hold it in place. Now, I do not take the levers apart. I do not take this all apart because this is all hydraulic. And with the boot being on there, it really doesn't get bad. So what I do is I just use WD-40 silicone lubricant, water resistant, and I just put just a little bit in the areas of movement, just for good measure. I mean, it really doesn't get dirty in there, as you can see. And we're going to put the boot back on. Now, if you remember, that little button head is this little button head. Okay. Now, what's kind of weird is you would think that it would go like this, but it doesn't. It actually goes like this. And that nestles on. I've done this so many times, the backwards the wrong way, that I wanted to make sure for this video that it was going to go in correctly. So this takes a little bit of doing. I'm going to tighten these up just a little bit more. There, so it doesn't wiggle. And then this has to get stretched over top. Okay. Perfect. So there are the boots on. Fits good. And we'll just kind of leave that loose for now. Okay, so now we got the throttle assembly right here. And we've got the two wires, cables. I don't know why I keep calling them wires. Okay, so there's no grease on these. There's no grease there, and there's no grease on here. So what we need to do is we need to add a little bit of grease. Now, I'm having a hard time trying to find this, but I use Yamaha Lube, and this is the lithium soap bait grease. It's waterproof, so I've been using this for years, and it works great. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of grease on the bar. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spread it around till it's almost not really doing anything, kind of like a very super light coat. And I'm almost trying to wipe it off. So I started with a big glue, but now it's more or less just a sheen on there. Nothing too great. Okay? And then what I do is I run it around. It's got nice movement. Again, this is just a very light coating. It's not, you know, when I push this on, I don't have a bunch of grease shoving to the end like you do on some bolts, okay? This is just a little bit, okay? So we know we got enough there. So now we need to put a little bit of grease. What I do is I put a little bit of grease in these grooves, just like so. And again, I just shove it in there just a little bit, and then I wipe it back off. And then I put a little bit where the cable goes in. So just a little bit. So when those cables go in there, it will have something to ride on. And I also put a little bit of grease right along here. And those are where the cables are going to ride. All right. Put a little bit of grease on the front here. And that's it. Basically just grease that up a little bit. All right, so we've got the cables lubed, we've got the handlebar lubed, the first thing we want to do is put the dust cover on. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this on the bar first, and then we're going to slide this through, ready for the throttle tube. This is going to get a little crazy, but okay. All right. So now we got the throttle tube, where the cables go in, that's going to be facing down. Okay. Now the front cable is going to go into this hole here. Now when we turn it upside down, it's going to be in the rear spot, which is what we have to do to get it in, because it's got to wrap around here. But I want to show you, so we're going to go like that, and we're going to take this cable, we're going to slide it in there. See, now it's in the right position, and we're going to take this rear one, slide that one in, and boom, there you go. So now that's correct. So now we're going to take the aluminum housings. Now there's a plastic spacer here. You're going to want the housing in front of that spacer towards the handle, towards the center of the bike. So that plastic spacer is going to be behind. So you can see it. There's the plastic spacer right there. Make sure it's not bound. Now what I do is I like to hold this as if it was put together, and we check it, make sure it doesn't bind, make sure it snaps back no problem. There you go. Okay, so now we take the screws. That's why I like wearing my sweatshirt. I got a big pocket in the front. Okay, so now we get that all put together. Now with us having the guards, I don't put it flush. I put it back probably like 1/8 of an inch, just so that once that guard gets installed, that it's not going to rub on the throttle tube. Now this, not really final assembly, because once I get everything all put back together, all of these bits will be readjusted a couple of times, and you can just pull this rubber over top of, you pull it back again. But again, this, I'm just showing you how we all put it back together. Okay, so then after that, we can get the starter button. And now what I like to do with the starter button is I like to put the screw, I like to feed it from the top instead of from the bottom, because then I don't have to look underneath. So what you can do is there's two of them. This one is a pass-through for the bolt, with a little screw. That's a pass-through, and this would be considered the nut side. That's threaded in. So this is going to go on the bottom. So what we'll do is we'll take this, feed it from the bottom. Okay, hold that in place with your third hand. Sometimes I feel like you need 3 hands to work on these things. Okay, so now we can thread that through. All right, we'll set that and use the screwdriver. There we go. All right, so now that gets screwed in, and if we need to adjust it, I can do it from standing over the bike instead of underneath. Again, I am not going to 100% tighten all this down, because I don't like to do that until I'm really ready to sit on the bike at once final assembly. Because once I get a final Once I get everything the way I want it, I'm sitting on the bike, then I can adjust all the levers. If you're super picky, you might want to take a picture of how this is all laid out prior to taking it all apart. But I'm not that picky. It's not that big a deal. Okay guys, that's it. We just cleaned the throttle assembly. All right guys, that's it for today's video. If you're wondering about the handguard and the cable ties, well, we're gonna put them to the side for now until we're done cleaning the bike. We're not done with the front yet, and these just get in the way. But if you have any questions about what we did here today on the throttle assembly, please leave them below. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can, and if I can't answer them, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll hopefully point you in a direction that maybe will help you find the answer. So click the like and subscribe and the bell so you won't miss more episodes on tearing this bike apart, cleaning it, lubing it, and doing all the fun stuff that we like to do. I've only been at it for about an hour and 20 minutes now, so get out there and work on your bike, even in the evening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.